guys! Welcome to your last lesson in topic 4. Today we're going to talk about water pollution, and this is a really relevant current environmental issue because anything that we put into a water system or really into our environment ends up in the water. So we're going to look at what some of those substances are and some of the damages they can cause and some of the ways that we can manage that damage. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is define water pollution. So that's pretty obvious. It's contamination of bodies of water by pollutants either directly or indirectly. And there are some major pollutants that we should be concerned about. The first is sewage, both human sewage and animal sewage. The second is nitrates and phosphates from fertilizers. The third is industrial stuff like oil and heavy metals and radioactive materials. And the last is energy. So this is heat and light and sound. All of those are different, all of those provide different disruptions to the organisms that are trying to live in water systems. There are a few ways that we can measure water pollution, and one is called biochemical oxygen demand. When we talk about biochemical oxygen demand, what we mean is the amount of dissolved oxygen it takes to break down organic material in a given body of water. And you can assign that a value for different sources and different bodies of water. So in this example table, you have two factories. Factory A produces a volume of 14 liters a day of some kind of a discharge. And the biochemical oxygen demand of that discharge per liter is 27. So it takes that much dissolved oxygen to break down that organic matter. That's significant because it means that is dissolved oxygen that's not going to other life sources in the water. It's not going to support plant life. So important because animals and organisms need oxygen too. Animals need, this is terrible, need oxygen. The second factory has a volume of discharge of 6 liters a day, and its biochemical oxygen demand is 40. So whatever that pollutant is that's in this discharge, it's obviously takes more oxygen to break down the substance than factory A does. If you had to guess which of these was worse for the environment overall, you'd probably guess factory B, and that's fair. But when you do the math, the overall oxygen demand of each of these 14 liters is actually higher. It's 378 grams of dissolved oxygen needed versus only 240 for factory B because the volume of discharge is lower. So when you consider biochemical oxygen demand, it's important to look at both of those numbers. But that's not the only way that you can measure pollution. You can also look at indicator species and biotics index values. So an indicator species does exactly what it sounds like. It indicates something about their environment due to its presence or absence. So if there are a lot of stonefly nymphs, that's usually an indicator of a healthy environmental system like this. If there are a lot of red-tailed maggots, it's usually an indicator of a not very healthy environmental system. You can also turn this into a mathematical calculation by measuring the biotics index value of different organisms in an environment. And in this measurement, you are actually given an assigned tolerance value for different species, and then looking at how many species with different tolerances are present in a given environment. So you actually don't need to know this calculation anymore for the IB, but I think it's important to understand that the biotic index value gives you a number. It gives you a mathematical calculation that you can complete. And next, we are going to look just quickly at the topic of eutrophication, because in terms of water pollution, eutrophication is a big deal, and we've talked about it in some different contexts in different lessons. Today we're going to define it, talk about its causes, and some of its effects. So eutrophication in sort of contemporary water systems is generally caused by nitrate and phosphate-based fertilizers washing into water systems. Because these fertilizers exist to cause plant growth, they cause significant plant growth in water-based systems, which doesn't sound all bad, but ends up causing a significant problem. So the process of eutrophication is this. Fertilizers containing nitrates and phosphates wash into the water. These chemicals encourage fast algal growth and algal blooms. And for a while, this is great because this sustains sort of enhanced life in whatever the system you're looking at is. But eventually, what happens is the algal blooms, and you can sort of see this here, start to block out light. They get so thick that things that live in the lower levels of water don't have any sunlight, and those organisms die off. Then, when there's no food chain supporting them and they run out of oxygen, the algae dies off as well, and then there's a complete collapse of the food chain, and you end with what is called a dead zone, which is happening in significant portions of our marine waterways all the time. There's a huge dead zone forming off the Gulf of Mexico that's really concerning for environmental activists and ecologists, and a similar thing is happening in the Chesapeake Bay, which is one of the sort of myriad of problems that is happening in the Chesapeake Bay right now in terms of water pollution. So eutrophication is a big deal and a big problem. It can be managed through aquaculture, fish farming of oysters, because the oysters will suck up all of this extra algae. So if you are ever at a point where you're considering what foods it's good and bad to eat, oysters aren't all bad because they can help combat this problem of eutrophication. So now that you have sort of a basis in water pollution, let's take a look at your homework. We have one more thing to do first, and that is talk about pollution management. That will actually help you a lot with your homework. So let's look at this. The process of pollution management is the same no matter what system you're looking at. There are the 3 tiers of management. The most effective is human activity. The second is controlling release of pollutants. And the third is mitigating the impact of the pollutants on the systems. And in your homework, we're going to look at a real-world example of a pollution problem, and you are going to be able to apply these levels of pollution management. So your homework assignment, if you're following along with the Environmental Systems and Societies textbook, is pages 227 to 233. And you, in your worksheets, have a paper 1 style case study analysis of the Danube River in Europe. So you are given 3 different figures to look at and some questions to answer. Give that a try, and when you are ready, we will go over the responses in the review video. So I will see you there.